Hello, Blue Jays fans. Welcome to episode 330 of the Jays from the Couch radio podcast. Got a great episode for you this week. We're going to look at what the Blue Jays are missing if they're going to be a championship team. Hello, Blue Jays fans, and welcome back to the Jays from the Couch radio podcast, brought to you by, of course, JaysFromTheCouch.com. I'm your host, as always, Shaun Doyle. You can follow me on Twitter at Doyle JFtC. We've got a great episode for you this week. We're going to take a look at some of the key elements that the Blue Jays are missing if they really, truly are a championship team. We're going to look at the rotation. We're going to look at maybe some second base. We're going to look at the bullpen. It's a great episode for you. We've got a lot to talk about. Before we get there, though, I want to take a minute to remind you of a couple of things. First of all, the Jays from the Couch, Blue Jays Talk for All Facebook group going strong. We've got our game chats going. We share a whole bunch of funny stuff, conversation starters. It's a great way to talk Blue Jays when you're at work. Don't tell the boss, or on the subway or anywhere else. You just join for free. Come join us and talk some Blue Jays. It's Blue Jays Talk for All on Facebook. Look us up. You'll find us. As well, you can support Jays from the Couch by going to Buy Me a Coffee. Give us your support. You enjoy our written content at jaysfromthecouch.com. Ryan Mueller's daily minor league recaps. We've got our podcast, our main podcast every Monday. We've got the On Fact Circle Tuesdays and Sunny Side of the Dome Thursdays. Lots of great content for you. Please consider making a donation and helping us pay the bills and all of that fun stuff. As well, an even more important initiative, we are taking on ALS. We've decided here at Jays from the Couch that we are going to do what we can to fight this terrible, terrible disease. And as a result, in part of our efforts, we have started a campaign where you can make a donation, a tax-deductible charitable donation at support.alsevents.ca/Jays from the Couch. Help us reach our goal there. If you want a little something extra for your money, you can head to our Redbubble shop, and we've got Jays from the Couch merchandise, Jays from the Couch radio. We've got On Fact Circle, Sunny Side of the Dome, lots and lots and lots of merchandise there available for you. And 100% of the profits go directly to the ALS Society of Canada. We're not doing this to make money. We're doing this to end this terrible disease. Please consider helping us out. To help me get through this episode 330, where have you been? If you missed them, go back and check them out on the audio version or on YouTube, Facebook, or Twitter. But to help me have this conversation, as always, we've got the feckless wonder himself, Steve Feck, host of the On Fact Circle. Good evening, sir. How you doing?
Good evening, Shaun. What's happening?
Not a whole lot, buddy. We're flying solo. I don't know. We're flying duo, I guess, is the correct usage there. Karen is at the game this evening, so it'll be Steve and I manning the ship, as it were. And Steve, we've got a great episode. We're going to look at what it means, I guess, what the Blue Jays are missing. What is it that is holding them back from being a championship team at this time? Obviously, it's an interesting conversation, right? Because we're only in April. Still, April's not finished, and we're still we're having this conversation about what they're missing to be a championship team. But I think it's very important, and we'll dive into all of those things. But before we do, we've got the ever popular MLB Minute segment. So if you're new, the MLB segment is a weekly feature here. We take one topic from around the world of baseball, and each of us waxes poetic for 1 minute and 1 minute only before the old timer on the device stops you in your tracks. And this week, we're going to take a look at, given that the baseball season is about a month or so-ish, almost a month in, and Steve and I decided that we're going to take a look at the biggest surprises across baseball. And Steve's going to lead us off here with, I think, which is actually not much of a surprise if you were paying attention. Right, Steve?
Absolutely. In fact, let me take a couple seconds. Let me pat myself on the back here before you start your timer. Okay, so you can start the timer, or have you already started the timer?
No, sir. It starts
Okay.
now.
Okay. Well, again, if you've been following what we've been talking about here on Jays from the Couch Radio podcast and on the On Feck Circle, I do the annual FECU projections. So it should be no surprise to you that the Rays are as good as they have been, and the Brewers. Now, all of the odds makers and all the experts, when they were talking about the top 10 possible World Series contenders, the Rays weren't mentioned. Neither were the Brewers. The Brewers have pitching, and they have pitching depth that perhaps doesn't get all the run that it should. And the Rays are the Rays. I mean, they find a way to get the most out of what they have. They have players, they have coaches that buy in to the system. So it should not be a surprise to you that they're this good. In fact, they may even be better than the record indicates, and their record is the best in Major League Baseball. So for me, the Rays and the Brewers are not surprises, though when you look at what the preseason prognostications were, they are.
Interesting. I'm still not sold on the Rays, so I'll be sitting here in September saying the same thing when Toronto is like 2 games back of Tampa Bay, fighting for that playoff spot. I'll be saying the same thing, I'm sure. All right, my 1 minute begins now. And I'm going to talk about the Pittsburgh friggin' Pirates, Steve's hometown team. Did anybody see this coming? Absolutely not. I defy anybody to tell me that they saw this coming. The Pittsburgh Pirates have the second best record in all of Major League Baseball entering play tonight. They're off tonight, but it still counts. Second best record in all of baseball, behind Steve's Tampa Bay Rays, of course. Listen to this. They are 8-2 in their last 10. They have won 7 games in a row. I don't even care who their competition is. This is the Pirates, who are supposed to be the easy competition for everybody else. 7 in a row. They have the 7th best walk rate at 10%. They are second in baseball in stolen bases at 25. So they're getting on base and they're stealing bases. And of course, they are 8th in runs scored with 111. Steve, I don't know that anybody saw this coming out of Pittsburgh.
No, he hit the post. Nice, really, really nice. And yet, thing that you did mention is, I think they have like 11 consecutive quality starts, and that includes
Insane.
rolling out the fossil remains of Rich Hill, who I swear to God, he was pitching when I was in Little League. And I'm 62, and he just never seems to die. But I think it's like 11 consecutive quality starts, and if anything was gonna hold the Pirates back, everyone was saying there's so much uncertainty with this pitching staff. What is Ben Cherington doing? And now we know Ben Cherington knew what he was doing, just like he knew what he was doing when he was helping kind of spearhead the drafts when he was here in Toronto. But yeah, it's such a great story. And unfortunately, they're still only drawing like 12, 15,000, a game. I mean, they'll sell out for fireworks night,
Right.
So I think the next one's coming up when the Jays are in town in the beginning of May. But
we should do. Somebody should go around and look at the league leaders and look at their attendance, because Tampa Bay Rays are the Tampa Bay Rays. But anyway, regardless, at least they're not the Oakland A's, right? Because what a disaster that organization is, and is currently trying to find its way out of at some point. But and the opposite end of that spectrum is your Toronto Blue Jays, who are looking to be, I guess, World Series contenders. I don't want to say, Steve, I don't want to say that they're struggling. I don't want to say that they're spinning their tires, because they are above 500. So it's not like everything is lost. But right now, Steve, when you look at, I guess, where the Blue Jays stand, not just like in the standings where they're 13-9, tied for 4th place, 6 games back. That doesn't necessarily sound great when you're 6 games back. Of course, given that there were 22 games in, so you've got 140 remaining. So, Steve, I guess the question, first of all, is more of on a general basis. But are you worried? Should we be worried? Is it still early? Like, all of those questions, I guess. Like, so what is your assessment of where the Blue Jays are right now, heading into play today?
Well, I want to put it in the context is that I'm not saying that the Blue Jays stink. I'm not saying that this is not a contending team. We're doing this little exercise within the context is we've all heard how many people believe that the Blue Jays are going to make it to the World Series. As they're constructed right now, there is some big question marks, some big holes. And I'm going to lend a little perspective here too, because I am old enough to have been in the stands in 1984 when the Tigers went off on that ridiculous start that they got off to. And actually, from about May 15th, on, the Blue Jays outperformed the Tigers, but the Tigers were so far out front, it didn't matter. It didn't matter whatever the Blue Jays did, they were not catching the Tigers. And that Blue Jays team was probably the first really legitimate contending team that the Blue Jays ever had under Bobby Cox and Pat Gillick. But Detroit just blew by everybody in the league, certainly everybody in the AL East, and it was too little, too late. So I want to lend some perspective to that too, because it's different for the Blue Jays. Their World Series hopes probably depend on them winning the East and being one of the top two seeds, because the other matchups, I'm not sure they're as favorable as if they were the AL East champion and being the one or the two seed.
Right. And I think that it'll all come down to, whether they're in first place or chasing first place in September, like we said, being a couple of games back. Here they are 6 games back in April. And you'll hear a lot of people talk about, that it's just April. It doesn't really matter at this point. But wins and losses are wins and losses.
Right.
And if that's what indicates whether or not you make the postseason, then you need those wins and losses to be favorable. And so I don't necessarily buy into this whole games in April don't really matter thing. But Steve, one thing that I will say is that there's this idea, there's a couple of notions that are kind of bouncing around in my head right now, along with a million other things. So let me try and grab onto them as they fly by here. But the first is Mark Shapiro has said before that you need about 50 or 60 games to really, get a sense of how competitive your team is going to be, that kind of thing. I'm not so sure that that is accurate. But then you also have this indication that, you're going to lose 50 games and you're going to win 50 games, regardless of how good your team is or how bad your team is. Those are pretty much a given. So it's the remaining kind of middle, 62 games that will really dictate where you are in the, I guess, at the end of the season. So, Steve, knowing with those two things in mind, where is your head as far as where the Blue Jays could end up in near the end of the season?
Well, I picked them as being the number one wild card team, and I still believe that. I mean, I said in March that the Rays were going to win the AL East, even before this really ridiculous run that they're on happened. But, Shapiro says you need to know how, whether you're a contender or not. I don't know that he really means it from that standpoint. I think that, you need 50 games for your bullpen to settle into roles. You need 50 games to see, okay, these changes that we've made or these young guys we brought up or whatever the situation might be, are they showing us enough that they should still be in the starting lineup or they need to go down for seasoning? That's where that first 50 game shadow boxing that they always do is, and there's some truth to that. My concern is that you talked about that 62 middle game. You're going to win 50. You're going to lose 50. Within that middle 62, those 62 other games, whether you've addressed your needs or whether you've made adjustments to your roster or whether you have the pieces in place, even if they're struggling out of the gate, like Manoah had a couple of really disheartening starts, but he came out and showed that's why he's Alek Manoah, because he went in and he just basically just toyed. He just basically toyed with the Yankees, as he always does. It seems whenever he plays the Yankees. So that's what I came up with the idea for this particular episode, and I pitched it to you. I'm concerned that there are enough holes still that 62 games, is it going to be 40 wins? Is it going to be 30 wins? And that makes a big difference as to whether you're going to be in contention or whether you're going to be a wild card team or whether you're going to be sitting at home.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. Because if you're already at 500, if you're looking at 50 and 50, and if you go 500 the remaining, you're a 500 team and you're not making the playoffs, especially in the AL East. You are not making the playoffs. Every team right now in the American League East is above 500. The Boston Red Sox in the basement are a game above 500. This is not going to be any different than any other year for any team in this division. It is going to be a dogfight. And while I think, like, if I were to look at my off-season kind of comparisons between like the Red Sox and the Blue Jays, it would have been no contest. And that still may be, right? But as of right now, we're looking at a 500 division. And regardless of whether or not we think that the Blue Jays will end up in first place or not, right now they're kind of in the mix, and you have a number of people fighting and all relatively in the same spot, and that makes things difficult regardless of whether or not they may end up being they could win the division at this place, and that would be fine. However, right now they've got to jump over 4 other people, whereas in the offseason, I would have thought that things wouldn't be as close as they are right now. And I think that's kind of what I'm getting at here, is that the American League East, on a year where I thought might have been a little bit easier for the Blue Jays, is not starting out that way. And that's what we kind of got to think about, right? So if we're looking at what are they missing to be a championship team, why don't we start there with Alek Manoah? And maybe even by extension the entire pitching staff, or the starting rotation in particular, because when we were entering the season, Steve, Alek Manoah, number 1, finished in the top 3 in Cy Young the year before. You're feeling pretty good. Kevin Gausman, I picked him to win the Cy Young Award this year, and he's off to a good start in that regard. But then everything else has been a massive question mark, even with like Yusei Kikuchi, right? But let's start with Alek Manoah first, Steve. This rotation, if the Blue Jays are going to win a championship, they need a consistent Alek Manoah, and we haven't had that yet.
We have not, but what we have seen is Manoah's innate ability to make adjustments on the fly. Even in that game in Houston, I saw a lot more positive signs, despite giving up 7 runs in 4 1/3 or something like that. I think, in that game, I saw a lot more positive signs in that game than I did, in his first couple of starts before that. He shows that, okay, I have this arsenal and I have the confidence to throw it. And if I continue to make adjustments and I continue to make myself better, the league knows that, okay, I might have a bad start here and there, but the league knows in general, we got to go in and we got to hope that everything goes right if we're going to score more than a handful of runs against Manoah. So with Manoah, and even with Gausman that had the bad start, I mean, there's a lot of positive signs there. I mean, now not only is a splitter, people chasing a splitter low in the zone, now he's come up with the fastball that dips down in the zone and people can't catch up and touch it either. So there's, that with those guys, in particular with Manoah showed us that on Saturday. He still has it. It's not an injury. It was something mechanical. I mean, I think it was more an overstriding, because if you look at the first couple of games, he was always looking down and stomping around the bottom of the mound. and every one of those starts, if it's one ballpark, okay, maybe it's a bad mound, grounds crew, whatever it is. But he never called the grounds crew out. He was overstriding, and that throw, especially a big body guy that throws, the whole pitching motion, out of whack, and you're not going to be in balance. You're not going to have that command. So I think Manoah's figured out whatever the issue is with that. So we have 1-1A, which is a good start.
Yeah. However, and Manoah is an interesting character too, right? Because very clearly not comfortable in his first few starts. Very clearly, and as you've indicated that already, and then of course watching him in New York seemed very comfortable, right? And I think that's part of that process that you're talking about. However, 2 starting pitchers does not a rotation make, right?
Correct.
And even like on the surface, when you're looking at things like, I want to just talk about Yusei Kikuchi here for a second, just for a second. So in 4 starts, 21 and a third innings pitched, seems to have figured things out. He's pitching to a 3.80 ERA. Which is great. However, his FIP, his fielding independent pitching, so basically, legitimately, what he's doing is 5.81. So he's not actually pitching as good as his ERA might indicate. And then when you start to consider like Jose Barrios, who seems to have started to figure things out, we're looking at a rotation, Steve, that kind of has yet to hit its stride. And so when you hear that, what is your reaction to just that in general, that they haven't hit their stride yet? Is this a thing that you feel like is going to work itself out eventually, or are there just question marks that like, is Barrios going to be a mystery all friggin' summer? Is Yusei Kikuchi going to have the bottom fall out of things at any moment? Like, how are you feeling about looking ahead to this rotation?
Well, I really worry more about the first 4 pitchers, but since you brought up Kikuchi here, if your 5th starter is posting a 3.80 ERA, I'm feeling pretty good about things. I understand the fielding independent. I understand in theory what it tries to do, but at the end of the day, this isn't like Satchel Paige calling all his fielders in to sit down around the mound while he strikes out somebody. Okay. Okay. That's why you have fielders out there. Okay. I mean, and then when you have confidence in your defense behind you, and especially with a guy like Kikuchi, who I think can get rattled a little bit. I think he feels overwhelmed sometimes, because as good as a pitcher as he was in Japan, and he was great his first 4 months in Seattle. Eventually, the league figured him out. And that's what's really so amazing to me with Kikuchi, is that not only has he changed his delivery, he's repeating that delivery, and he's a lot more aggressive than he has ever been throughout his career. So as of right now, if you're Kikuchi is what you want, his performance is what you want as your 5th starter. I'm not sure you want Kikuchi as your 3rd starter, but as your 5th starter, I'm okay with that. So we've got a 1 and a 1A, or 1, 2, and 5. It's 3 and 4. Okay, where my concerns are, not that they don't have the talent.
Yeah.
It's just that I have serious concerns about their pitch selection. And in the case of Bassett, he has too many pitches, but he just does it in order. It's almost like, you're not going to pass the test, so you just kind of mark it A, B, C, D, A, B, C, D, and you're hoping that enough of your answers come out that you pass your test. That's what Bassett reminds me of. I mean, Bassett's a good pitcher. For me, he's a back of the rotation guy. He's not that number 3 starter. And Barrios, this happens more with relievers, where hitters notice patterns. Relievers don't really only have 2 pitches that they generally will use. Occasionally you'll have one that's the 3rd. So eventually they know that you're going to show them, let's say, fastball, slider, fastball in that rotation. Eventually they remember that. So the second or third time they're facing that reliever, they're ready for that pitch. If it's a 2-1 count, doesn't really want to count us on that fourth pitch. They know they're getting a fastball, so they're sitting on it, and they're able to take advantage of that. Berrios, the opponents, the word is out there now, and it's been out there for more than a season now. He does not have command of that four-seamer. Okay, he is leaving that out, and he's throwing it pretty much in the same situation, in the same count every single time. So if you are up 2-1 or 3-1 in the count, he's going to throw that four-seamer, and if he doesn't have command of it, it doesn't have the movement that it really needs, he's going to get battered around. So this is what my concern is. You had brought up earlier the consistency of Manoah. And yes, okay, for the first couple of starts, he was inconsistent. I think that's going to be a thing in his career. Not necessarily the first couple of starts, but because he's a big guy and it's really hard to maintain that delivery. His mechanics are going to get thrown off, and you're going to have every season, a couple of starts. I think it was August that we had the problems with Manoah last year, right? Wasn't it like mid to late August? You're always going to have that little stretch, and you're like, oh my God, but he's so good. I don't understand. It magnifies what he fails because he is so consistent and so good on the times that he doesn't. But as far as from what I have seen with Berrios, and I went back before this podcast and looked at some video on Chris Bassett, both in New York, even though the numbers looked okay, and his last season in Oakland, I think he's not chipping pitchers, but his pitch selection, his pattern is so predictable that hitters in key situations are exploiting that. So that's where my concern in the rotation is 3 and 4, not necessarily at the front end and at the tail end with Kikuchi.
Right. And I have fewer concerns about Bassett, to be perfectly honest. I think he's going to be what he has always been, and that's always been kind of a 3-4 kind of starter. He'll have days where he looks really good, and then he will have days where he doesn't. And that's kind of like I kind of expected that, but I think for me, Berrios is the one that I feel like there's more there, and it's so frustrating. And we've talked about it on this podcast, and I'm sure many other podcasts have talked about the same thing, is that, what is it going to take? And I think the Blue Jays have tried that, right? When we heard he was getting rocked at the WBC, Pete Walker said, well, they just, they had him doing, what did he say? Pitch selections that we wouldn't, or sequences that we wouldn't have him do here. So I thought, okay. Anyway, but as it turns out, he actually, up until Kevin Gausman's start yesterday against the Yankees, he was leading the team in pitcher WAR, in wins above replacement. Jose Berrios was. And I think that, obviously he's not going to be a better pitcher than Kevin Gausman or Alek Manoah. I get that. But I think it kind of surprised me a little bit in that he's actually kind of been better than we may have thought. But I went looking a little further because I think that's surprising. So I needed to figure it out. Anyway, it turns out he's actually using his four-seamer less and throwing what Fangraphs and Baseball Savant and StatCast, they can't kind of get together on the same page as far as what the pitch is. StatCast calls it a slurve. Fangraphs calls it the sinker curve, whatever it is, he's throwing that and more and kind of shying away from that four-seam fastball. And I think that's got to be the key. If, as you said, and it's very obvious, they are sitting on the four-seamer, then, you got to just completely flip the script and, throw it in counts where you would never have thrown it before, or whatever have you, because if he can kind of sort that out, this rotation, Steve, just by fixing Jose Berrios, Kikuchi is what he is. Bassett is what he is. Getting Jose Berrios right changes this rotation monumentally.
Oh, I agree. And I think one thing you need to have is Danny Jansen behind the plate for every Berrios start. I know Schneider doesn't like to do that, But the bottom line is Danny Jansen commands the game from behind the plate. Alejandro Kirk is still kind of shuffling and finding his way. And the other thing I would do, and it's a radical deal, but I'm glad you brought up the pitch sequencing and Pete Walker. I think that with Barrios, they need to call the pitches from the bench.
Mm-hmm.
I think, Gausman and Manoah, I think, have earned the right to call their own game. I think Bassett, absolutely Barrios, and to a certain extent, Kikuchi. I think Pete Walker or John Schneider or some combination thereof needs to call those pitches from the bench. And it's not, it happens already. I mean, it happens in Tampa Bay. I mean, to a certain degree, pitchers have some wiggle room, but in key situations, Kevin Cash is calling the pitches from the dugout. So, and with Barrios, even though he's been told and they have cut back, which is good, his four-seam usage, ultimately, that's the pitch that in Barrios's head, in certain situations, that's the one he wants to throw. So if you eliminate that and say, Jose, until you show you've got command of this stuff, we're going to call the pitches for you. And I think that should be done for 3, 4, and 5, the back end of the rotation. I have that much faith and that much trust in Pete Walker, and certainly John Schneider from his days in the minors as a manager, and is also being a catcher by trade in the minors. I believe that he has a really good concept of what he wants to see executed in different situations.
Right. Okay, so let's move from the rotation. What else do they need? They need, Steve, a consistent second baseman. This whole Kevin Biggio, Whit Merrifield, and of course Santiago Espinal having suffered from Garrett Cole's inability to throw a strike in that particular moment. I'm not going to say it was intentional. However, he got plunked by Garrett Cole.
He threw at him. I'll say it. See, if I say it, you can always go to court when they sue the podcast and say he's a doddering old fool. He's a 62-year-old guy that's had 7 or 8 concussions. What do you expect him to say?
Right.
Where if it comes from you, you're obviously more well-spoken. You're more thoughtful. So if they could sue you, they could sue and probably win if you say Garrett Cole threw at him. But I'm telling you, he threw at him.
Well, if either way, if Garrett Cole wants to come and sue the Jays from the Couch radio podcast, come at me, bro, because you're not going to get anything. First of all, and B, you're going to lose that support. Any support is gone because you're coming after somebody who, Anyway, bring it, Garrett Cole. I ain't scared. But anyway, so we've got. I'm calling out Garrett Cole like I'm Alek Manoah or something. Like, whatever. Anyway, exactly. Second base needs to be sorted out, Steve. I guess my question is, because I don't know about you, but it almost feels like when you have this much versatility on a roster, it feels like there's almost too much. And I know that that kind of sounds insane to say it out loud. But John Schneider's got to do something about this second base issue, Steve. And for you, what is the solution?
Well, the solution is so obvious, and it's right before our eyes. And it's that you have 2 choices. You can go with I don't want to say a strict platoon, because I think there are situations where you want Merrifield hitting against right-handers and he getting the preponderance of at bats. I think you should approach second base like you do the catching situation. You have 2 solid guys. Find a way to mix and match, where it goes, and then you have your utility man still when he's back healthy. And Espinal has certainly not in the last half of last year, after the All-Star break and the early going this year, he has not shown that he is a consistent major league hitter. He's a good hitter, but I don't
Mhm.
know that he's that consistent piece. And again, now we're not talking about 2021 or 2022 anymore. We're talking about this is a team that so many people have picked. And I think everybody at Jace from the Couch but me picked them to go to the World Series or at least go to the ALCS. You need to have that consistency in the infield. If you're always bouncing things around, I mean, shortstops and first basemen get used to the tendencies of having a regular second baseman out there. I mean, nobody plays 162 games. Well, Whit Merrifield plays 162 games if you let him, but I mean, he certainly has that track record there. But I mean, Kevin Biggio has situations where against certain right-handers, I think that it makes sense to play him there. I think he is the best of the lot at second base. Okay, maybe the numbers haven't shown that because he's bouncing around so much, but he's a Gold Glove caliber second baseman. He truly, truly is. So I think if you do at second base what you're doing with your catching, as the season flushes out, you're going to see Danny Jansen get more and more time behind the plate. Kirk will catch a couple days a week. He'll DH. You're going to do the same thing at second base. The days that they're not playing at second, Merrifield or Biggio can go rest somebody in the outfield. But ultimately, I think Whit Merrifield should be getting 65% of the calls there and being placed in the lineup at second base. Have Biggio back him up, and you still have your versatility in Espinal bouncing all over the place, or if they have to call up someone like an Ano Lopez that can bounce all over and do the different things on the infield. That's what I would do. And quite honestly, you cannot keep doing this situational stuff. Oh, we want to get everybody at bats. That's what spring training was for. Okay, and that's not what you're doing now. And I think it has played itself out that Espinal cannot be a regular. He's not going to be the regular third baseman with Matt Chapman. He's not going to be the regular shortstop with Bo Bichette. Kevin Biggio is not going to be the regular first baseman with Vladdy. So take your two best bets, divvy up the playing time with the majority of it going to Whit Merrifield, because I really think that Biggio is a better fit in the outfield. In the two corner slots, I think he's a better defensive outfielder than Whit Merrifield will project out to be over the course of a year. And that's how I would approach it.
So given that, and I agree that Espinal is probably, of the three, probably the one I would consider to be a really good bench piece. And that doesn't necessarily mean he's a lesser player, but his role is best used, I think, as that kind of utility guy, moving position to position, and so on. Whereas the other two, I believe, have to be playing every day. But my question, I guess, Steve, like, how much of this do you think it's early in the season and we're kind of hoping or waiting to see if one of them kind of run away with the job? But if that's the case, then Steve, it gets kind of difficult when you're kind of, has anybody really been given the opportunity, enough playing time to run away with that job, right? So I guess that's my question to you is, do you think that's what they're doing? And if it is what they're doing, I don't think it's working.
No, I don't think in the long run, I don't think that it's going to work. I think it's worked at times right now, but it is a chicken and egg situation. Okay. How can you earn that job and lock down that job if you're not given the majority of the opportunities to do that? I mean, Whit Merrifield has proven that he's durable and can play 150, 155, 160 games of the season over multiple seasons. In fact, I think he had some kind of ridiculous streak of 400 some odd games in a row or whatever. So he's proven that he can do that, where Biggio has been a little bit injury prone. But basically say, okay, look, we're gonna give Whit the majority of the things, like I said earlier. And that's what you do. You don't let it play it out. You say, this is what we're asking you to do. This is your role on this team. We want you. We're going to play you primarily at second base with Merrifield, and you need to show us that you are worthy of having those everyday turns at second base, because the nice thing is they do have alternatives. They've got Kevin Biggio, and theoretically they have Santiago Espinal, but in essence, I mean, if you keep Whit Merrifield at second base, I think it helps. I think it helps him. And Biggio committed himself in the offseason to, okay, I'm going to do a little bit more. I'm going to be more open to playing the outfield, or maybe resting Vladdy at first, and then getting my turns at second base. But so that's what I would do. I mean, I don't think you can let it play out. I mean, I understand in theory what they've done, but I think that even more than the Bassett Barrios thing, that concerns me more. They're playing around, and they're not making a decision. You don't need to wait 50 games, I don't think, based on how Merrifield and Biggio have played, to decide that those are the two guys that should get the primary looks at second base.
And for whatever it's worth, maybe nothing, but Whitney Merrifield has put up 0.3 wins above replacement already, with a weighted runs created plus of 112, so better than average bat. Very little power, of course, but obviously it's still early, and he's on his way to his 30-40 stolen base season with 2. He better get there. I'm telling you right now, Whit. You better get it. You better get it. Anyway, I think for me, I would rather see one of them just be give Whit Merrifield the second base job. Kevin Biggio can, if he's kind of the second option at second base, then he can also be an option for right field, for left field, for first base, and you can kind of make up the extra playing time that way. But if Whit Merrifield is, you give him a chunk of time and it's not working out, then you put Kevin Biggio in there. Like, right. You got to be able to give them a proper sample size, I guess, but also be ready to switch and jump ship. Right. Because like we've said already a million times, like, this is go time. This is the season where you're supposed to be winning ball games. So I think you got to kind of do what you got to do to make those, to win those games, even if that means that some guys don't get to play as much.
Right. And we talked about earlier, we kind of put it within the context of the Blue Jays being a legitimate World Series team. Not a playoff contender, not a wild card, whatever you want to think, a legitimate World Series team. When you look at the World Series, you don't see a lot of this lineup juggling going around. I mean, the only juggling you really see is really more with the pitching, where you might only want to go with 3 starters. So you have some starters coming into the bullpen mix, and then you see some unusual situations. But really, it's a steady lineup. I mean, I would have to go back, but I can't think of a World Series champion that was a strict platoon lineup, really. I mean, you had some people that platooned, but I mean, I don't really think that it works out. And then, look at the San Francisco Giants. They had that 107 win season, but in the playoffs, they sputtered because it's fine to help keep you fresh and healthy and do the platooning thing, but really you need to get in a groove in order to. And if you want to look at another sport, we're in the middle at the beginning of the NHL playoffs. There are some teams that are surprising, but because they're in a groove, everybody is doing their job. So the Bruins have struggled a little bit because their opponent is doing all the little things right. The Rangers have just had their way with the Devils because everybody is taking their role, whether it be a third line, fourth line, whatever it is. And that does translate into baseball as well. That's why the Phillies got where they did, because not only did they get hot late, they had a unit that was in sync. All 9 players, well, 10 if you include the DH, they were all in sync. And that's why the Phillies were able to make that surprising run to the World Series last year. And that's how the team was assembled, to eventually, when everybody was healthy, all kind of be on the same page.
Right. The other thing, the last thing that we're gonna touch on that a championship team needs is an effective, bullpen. And Toronto's bullpen has been the opposite of that. Um, they've been pretty horrible and awful together. Um, and I don't really know how else to describe it other than that. There's some individuals who are performing. Like obviously Jordan Romano and Tim Meza has been has been great. Eric Swanson has been great. But then there's been some really, really bad performances, like Garcia's ERA is up over 7. We've got Bass, who is too concerned about popcorn being spilled on an airplane than actually getting people out. Like we have this bullpen is a bit of a mess, right? So if this team, Steve, is going to be a championship team, I think, and adding Nate Pearson is not the answer. By the way, Nate Pearson getting called up tonight against the White Sox, not the answer, because he's a big old fat question mark as well. So, Steve, I really believe, like, if the Blue Jays, what are they missing? They're missing an effective bullpen, and I really believe they're missing at least one more elite, high strikeout, high velocity arm. And I know Karen Suter, who's not here tonight, she would say it doesn't really matter how they get outs as long as they get outs. I agree. However, late in a game, I want a fireball like a Munoz from Seattle coming in and just lighting the world on fire. So, Steve, I guess my point is here, what are they missing? They're missing at least one more elite arm in that bullpen. And I telling you it's going to come from outside of the organization, because right now I don't see who that is going to be from within.
Agreed. And again, it's let me beat my drum. You cannot wait, Ross Atkins, until July 31st to get your bullpen piece that you need. 50, but the bullpen is really the only area of a team where I wholeheartedly buy into you need 50 games to see what you have.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Anthony Bass, though he's had some closing experience when he was at the Marlins, it didn't last long. So he's not a leverage guy that you're going to depend on at the end of the game. Zach Pop has shown a lot. He's shown me even more than I thought he had, and I was pretty high on him. Zach Pop has not been there before. He has not been in those leverage situations in a pennant race going down. Yes, I know he got acquired at the deadline, but I mean, he really didn't have a lot of high leverage situations. Tim Meza can only throw so many games. Every time he goes out there, and this is terrible, I just think of when Dave Dravecky broke his arm on the pitch after he came back from cancer, because he should never have been throwing. Tim Meza is, in essence, he's recovered from a serious arm injury, but he can't be the only answer from the left-hand side. So firstly, I think they've got obviously they have their closer in Jordan Romano. Would it kill us to have a second guy with serious closing experience? It really would. I think it would be really, really, interesting. But I mean, I think Eric Swanson is your 8th inning guy, and then you can juggle around when he's back healthy, and Garcia and Pop. I think you can do different things. Now, I'm a lot more intrigued with what they're going to do with Nate Pearson. If they indeed make him a 1-inning pitcher and start it like in the 6th and the 7th, because he's a little bit of a head case, which I don't think anybody foresaw, but he loses confidence really, really, easily. If they use him in that role, I do think that a big part of their bullpen starts to settle in. It starts to slot, if you will. And you can move guys that can pitch bulk innings. I think Simber could be a bulk inning guy. As much as I love him coming in certain situations, I think he's a bulk guy. Anthony Bass can be a bulk guy. when your starter's having a tough night and bringing him in that way. But you're right. They have to bring somebody in. They cannot wait. And once again, his Friday night appearance notwithstanding, that $9.3 million you're paying to Brandon Bell would have gotten you 2 additional pieces to go there. And it's, really at the minor league level after Pearson, you don't really have much. I mean, AAA Bisons do not have a lot of major league ready pieces that you can depend on. And I don't ever want to hear the name Trent Thornton even mentioned on a broadcast. Never mind being on the roster. I don't want you even referring to the fact he's still in the organization. Okay. So, and I admire Atkins and Shapiro were really great in Cleveland in developing relievers and then letting them and giving them the opportunities. The problem is they were so invested on them being the smartest guys on the block. They waited way too long before admitting they didn't have the talent that they thought that they had. And they weren't great at when they were in contention, like every other year, it seemed they were in contention when those two were in Cleveland. They weren't really great at reacting early enough where relievers can make an impact. And I think more than any position on the field, a bullpen arm can make an impact on a season starting, let's say, Memorial Day through the trading deadline. If you're getting them in that little gap there as close to July 1st as you can, I think that's a lot more important. I think 3 or 4 games for a guy that's going to stabilize your bullpen is a huge advantage if you are aggressive and jump out and do it like a Dave Dombrowski or a Jerry Dipoto.
And the only thing about that is at this point, like Dulcimeris brings up a good point here. The last relievers the Jays were able to get early in the season were Jacob Barnes and Trevor Richards. That's the caliber that would be available right now. So either you're paying an extreme amount for a proven elite arm, or you're not, and you're hoping, and in that case, I don't know that I want the Toronto hoping. But regardless, I don't disagree with you. I think that either way, however it gets fixed, the one thing I want to kind of throw out there is that when we're talking about relievers, they're from one year to the next, they can be, for lack of a better word, inconsistent. And even within a season and a sample size, right? So we're looking at Tim Meza has 6 innings pitched, and they've been great. Zach Pop has 9. Eric Swanson 10.1 innings, Jimmy Garcia 10, Adam Simber 10, Jordan Morano 9.1. So like we're talking about a group of guys who really haven't had a whole lot of time to kind of sort themselves out, right? And so that in whether I don't know if I'm giving necessarily a free pass to the front office or not, but you can almost say they're kind of in that sticky point where, well, we haven't really seen much from the bullpen. Collectively, they've been yikes. We need to do something. And there's kind of like almost like a no man's land there, with regard to that decision making process. And I'm not suggesting, Steve, that gives them a free pass to just sit around and twiddle their thumbs and hope it gets sorted out. That's not what I'm saying.
No,
but what I am saying is that it is a difficult decision, right? Because you're basing it on such a small sample. That's all.
The thing is, I don't think that you are. I think that you're looking at a 3-year window with relievers. And you're also looking at situations where maybe a guy is now in a different role than he was the year before, and he's not adjusting to that role as well, whether it be a guy going from a bridge reliever to a back of the bullpen reliever, or whether you're going from a guy that was closing and now he's not closing. Dulcimeris, I love you. I mean, I love when your name comes up on here. This is one time I'm really going to disagree with you. Why is it the same general managers year in, year out get the players that they need early in the season? Why is that? Because they're aggressive and they're not afraid. Can you imagine AJ? I'm surprised AJ Preller doesn't make a trade every single day. I mean, honestly, and Dipoto and Dombrowski and Neander and the front office in Milwaukee. I know Stearns is gone now, but in essence, that whole team there, even the Twins and the Indians, they go out early and they get pieces that they need. So if they can do it, then every team can do it. You can't sit there and just say on paper, Jose Barrios did not really. It looks like the numbers are bad, but when you look at on tape, Jose Barrios didn't get knocked around. I don't see where he's getting hit that hard, despite the fact. I mean, I duck watching Barrios last year, and I'm at home. I wasn't even there at the games, and I was ducking when he was on the mound a lot of the times. So if these guys can get it done, then they all can. And I think Blue Jay fans suffer from AAitis. They have it in their head that Alex Anthopoulos left the cupboards bare when he left. Well, he didn't leave. He left because he was pushed out the door. They have it in their head, and that's kind of the company line that Shapiro and Atkins was kind of putting out there. Is like, well, we need to restock the shelves before we can really start to, going long-term contracts and really trying to be competitive again. They did need to, they were old. They needed to get people out. But in essence, a lot of the guys on this roster now, including Vladdy and Danny Jansen and a handful of others, were all here when Alex Anthopoulos was pushed out the door. But they bought all of this crap that AA left the cupboards bare. And I think Blue Jay fans are still kind of jittery about that. Like, well, we can't trade our farm system. So, we don't want what happened in 2016 or whatever, or 2015. So it's okay. I mean, they'll get it done. They always make trades. Yes, they always make trades, but it's too late. All of the other guys have already been aggressive and already kind of gotten the bigger names. So that's why if you're not aggressive, you're going to have to settle for a Trevor Richards, and a Barnes, because you weren't out there from pretty much spring training and just berating a guy saying, I want this guy, I want this guy, I want this guy, I want this guy. My favorite part of the movie Moneyball was Billy Beane being so obsessed with getting Ricardo Rincon. It started at the beginning of the movie, and then come July, he was going to get that guy. And they didn't show it in the movie, but I guarantee you that he was calling Atkins in Cleveland. Not Atkins, I mean Shapiro in Cleveland every single day. Hey, I see Ricardo. He walked two guys. Yeah, we need to get him. That's what you need to do. You need to be so obnoxious about it that eventually you get the player that you want.
Right. I wish Brad Pitt would call me, but anyway, that brings us to almost the end of this episode. It's actually time now for fake Blue Jays news. And again, if you're new, first of all, welcome. Make sure you're subscribing and all of that stuff so that you can get notified when we have our episodes and all that. But the fake news segment is just that. It's fake items we throw out there to have some fun, to wrap up our episodes every week. And we have a lot of fun with it, and we hope you enjoy it and recognize it for what it is. Fake Blue Jays news. Steve, over to you.
Thank you, Shaun. Earlier this month, the Mets radio broadcast team were forced to leave the visitor radio booth in the Oakland Coliseum to do their broadcast. And the reason? A possum had taken up residency in the booth, and that created a health hazard on the analysts. Now, it did boost the A's attendance figures by one every game because they could count on the possum being there. And maybe if there were more possum, maybe they wouldn't be moving to Las Vegas. But that's a different thing. But just before the live stream, Jay's team president, Mark Shapiro, had told the JFtC radio podcast that the team had to address a strange odor emanating from the radio booth at Rogers Center. Shapiro said, we were doing a final walkthrough before opening day festivities when we noticed a strange smell coming from the radio broadcast area. The stench was noticeable and palpable. It gave me a terrible headache within minutes. So Shapiro called in a hazmat crew. They conducted an investigation, did a deep clean and sterilization. They didn't really find anything, but the stench was there. So no official update, though, from the Blue Jays as to whether that it still stinks in the Jays radio booth, even after the deep clean and sterilization.
What are you getting at?
I'm thinking that maybe it wasn't something environmental. I'm thinking it's someone that had a microphone in front of them, and he just stinks. But I don't know. I know I get a headache listening to the radio broadcast, but again, that's speculation. It's fake news. We don't know officially yet whether that stench is gone from the radio broadcast area. And one person, other than Vladimir Guerrero Jr. himself, was happy to hear the Blue Jays first baseman get booed heartily during the weekend series in the Bronx. Blue Jays general manager Ross Atkins told reporters on Sunday that his strategy to wait out Guerrero and not offer him an extension before the star core piece hits free agency has obviously paid off. With Yankee fans voicing their hatred of Vladdy every time he came to the plate, giggled Atkins, this all but eliminates New York as a free agent destination. Fans and the media need to start giving this front office some credit for its baseball operations decisions. But when it was pointed out that there was a second high payroll team in New York, the Mets, and that Vladdy's dad, Hall of Famer Vladimir Guerrero Sr., had played for and was happy playing in cities with deep pocket owners like Anaheim and Texas, Atkins appeared kind of shocked and mumbled, well, at least he can't sign in Montreal. Over to you, Shaun.
Thanks, Steve. In other fake Blue Jays news, Nate Pearson will be called up and will be in uniform for Monday's contest against the White Sox. He'll be taking the spot on the roster that was vacated by Adam Simber, who hits the IL with a right rhomboid strain. When told of his promotion, Pearson was excited to get another chance to prove himself. However, it isn't all that easy. Whether or not Big Nate gets into a game depends on his ability to identify where on the human body the right rhomboid is. Nate's first guess was on the right side of the body. Manager John Snyder said, well, close enough, or about as close to a strike as he's used to seeing from Pearson, so he accepted it. Of course, the bullpen can use all the help it can get. The relief corps sits uncomfortably in 22nd spot with just 0.2 wins above replacement and 20th with a 4.35 ERA. That's it. There's no fake news item here since the bullpen has been a joke all on its own. Finally, the Blue Jays are beginning what is expected to be a heated legal battle with the Pittsburgh Pirates. The NL Central leading Pirates in 2023. Let's just take a moment and recognize that. Holy crap. Anyway, the NL Central leading Pirates have gone rummaging through the home run celebration recycling bin and are busting out the home run jacket. For their part, the Blue Jays are seeking damages for having their ideas stolen. Sorry. When asked, club president Mark Shapiro had this to say to Jays from the Couch. I can't disclose a lot of the proceedings, but I will say that we would be happy to settle this out of court if the Pirates would simply give us a share of their profit from the jacket. They're clearly benefiting from it since it has them in first place. We're 6 games back, so 6 games is an acceptable settlement. And that has been fake Blue Jays news.
Yeah, now keep in mind that they were doing sword play before they went to the jacket. And rumor has it that they were concerned, like Andrew McCutchen faked that he was cut by the sword during one of the over the weekend. And, and I think a lot of people actually took it kind of serious. So I'm wondering if that had something to do with...
Of course. Whatever it is, it's better than the Orioles and their little drinking out of a hose thing.
But you know what else is ironic with your fake news thing about Nate Pearson? Considering the amount of injuries this guy has had over the last 3 years, how did he not hurt his rhomboid and not know where it's at?
True. I should have put that in there. It's the only place you haven't hurt, Nate. Anyway, Dulcimeris is chiming in with some more fake Blue Jays news. My fake news is from the future, 2033. After years of random rule changes and resulting declines in popularity of Major League Baseball, MLB Commissioner Still, Manfred, gets rid of the pitch clock, sticky ban, etc. And he does this by eliminating pitchers altogether. Hitters now hit off a tee. This saves the owners billions on salary, and Manfred continues to be their hero. Fake Blue Jays news from Dulcimeris. Thank you so much for that. To Dulcimeris, who's always got comments and questions and his 2 cents to throw into every episode, and we really appreciate that. Watching on YouTube, thank you so much, Dulcimeris. And for everybody else, whether it's on YouTube or Facebook or Twitter, I want to say thank you for tuning in every week and for sharing our stuff, for commenting on our stuff, and all of that fun stuff. We really do appreciate it, and thank you for checking out JaysFromTheCouch.com. All of our Blue Jays content are written form there. Join our Facebook group, Blue Jays Talk for All, and we can chat more Blue Jays, joining our game chats and all that stuff. It's a lot of fun, so join us there as well. And don't forget to support our fight against ALS. Make a charitable donation at support.alsevents.ca/Jays from the Couch. Help us reach our goal there. Or if you wish, you can buy yourself some neat little swag. Get yourself a little hoodie, a little mug, and all of that fun stuff. And 100% of the profits go directly to the ALS Society of Canada. We're making zero money here because there are more important things in life. So please consider helping us out in that cause. So I want to say thank you to Steve as well for joining us tonight. Thank you, sir, for taking your time. I really do appreciate it.
It's always a pleasure. I tune into the On-Fec Circle. I mean, usually I'm always hyping it, and it generally sucks. So I probably shouldn't be hyping it. But tomorrow night, we bring back Lawson, the true future general manager of our Toronto Blue Jays. We're going to talk about roster construction and some other takes from both Jays from the Couch. And when Keegan was on, we're going to talk to Lawson about that, kind of get a young guy's perspective. I mean, I could be his great grandfather, really, let alone his grandfather. I could probably be Lawson's great grandfather, but it was such a wonderful experience having him on over the winter, and I'm really happy to have him back tomorrow night.
Absolutely. It'll be a lot of fun. Lawson's a great character. He's a good Blue Jays fan, and it's worth definitely checking out. Make sure you tune in to Sunny Side of the Dome as well. Thursday, 6 p.m. Eastern Time. Steve's show coming at you tomorrow, 6 p.m. Eastern Time. We've got a lot going on at Jays from the Couch, on both on our YouTube channel, on Facebook, and on Twitter, and the written portion at JaysFromTheCouch.com. So lots coming at you. So for Steve, for Lawson for tomorrow, and for our big guy, Big Nate Pearson, this is Shaun Doyle. You can follow me on Twitter at Doyle JFtC, hoping life gives you a juicy fastball down the middle and you don't miss it. Take care.